Paul Gard there. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his country has carried out its biggest attack against Hamas militant targets in Gaza since the war in 2014 in response to rockets fired into Israel. The Defence Force says Hamas fired around 200 rockets and mortar shells from the Gaza Strip over the weekend. Noura Erakat is a human rights lawyer and assistant professor at George Mason University, and she joins us now. Noura Erakat, welcome. So there's been more bloodshed in Gaza and Sderot over the weekend. The US envoy has appealed to all Palestinians. He appealed to Israelis as well, but this is what he said about Palestinians. Appealed to all Palestinians, to all parents of children in Gaza to step back and keep the protests peaceful. Do you acknowledge the onus is on both sides to pull back?
I think we need to be really careful when we talk about bloodshed and we equivocate and create false parity between these two sides. There is no bloodshed in Sderot. And in fact, what's coming out of Israel and what is being complained about is that they feel trauma over the sound alarms about the rockets.
There were rockets that apparently landed in Sderot, and there were people who were injured, so there was bloodshed there.
But the idea that we create parity and we fail to recognize that there is actually structural violence in the Gaza Strip where Palestinians, there were 3 young children killed, that raises the death toll in just the past 3 months to 139 civilians who have been killed. And so when we say bloodshed and make it look like it's just mayhem in the region, what we're doing is we're obfuscating the structural violence that's taking place. This is not to say that not all sides suffer. This is not to say that not all sides have a lot of fear. This is not to say that all children deserve to live in complete peace. But in order to get there, we need to deal with the power disparity and what is the root cause of this conflict. In the Gaza Strip, there is a siege that has been in place, a naval blockade and a land siege for 11 years that has resulted in 44% unemployment rate, has resulted in the fact that cancer patients cannot get treated, medicines cannot be kept in refrigerators, there is no access to hygienic water, 830,000 people are on food aid for survival. And so when we talk about bloodshed, we are obviating this kind of structural violence, which makes it impossible for a society to live and thrive.
But when we're looking for a long-term solution to this, is Hamas firing rockets into Israel helping the situation?
Not at all. I don't think so. But the only time that the news media is paying attention is when Hamas fires those rockets.
No,
nobody else is paying attention.
The news media pays a lot of attention. I can tell you that the Australian media here pays a lot of attention to what's going on in Israel.
I come from the United States, so I can tell you that the only time that anybody ever pays attention is when those rockets are fired. And yet here we are 11 years on, and the world community has not been able to lift a siege, which the World Health Organization says will drive Gaza to be unlivable by 2020. That's in 2 years. And so, no, I don't think that that's helpful. I also don't think that that's the source of the problem. Israel placed Gaza under siege and actually occupied Gaza well before there was a Hamas established in 1987. They actually occupied Gaza twice, in 1956 and 1967. And so when we only fixate on Hamas and rockets, we make it look like that's the source of the problem, but the actual source of the problem is that Israel doesn't want to recognize that these are Palestinian native populations, refugees that want to go home, and communities that want to live with full dignity and human rights.
So what is the key then to coming towards some kind of long-term solution? And I know that you argue that the onus is on the Israelis to do the right thing, but how do the Palestinians deal with Hamas, which, as you say, is you concede is undermining the process as well, so that some kind of agreement can be reached?
Well, let's just be clear that Hamas is part of the Palestinian fabric as well. And before they won parliamentary elections in 2006, they were the primary source of social services that were delivered to Palestinians in the form of education and healthcare. This is a people, a stateless people living under occupation, which the world community has more or less abandoned. And so we need to think about what is the primary solution. And it's not rocket science. It's all there. We've done it before. We end the occupation. We dismantle an apartheid regime. We work towards settler decolonization. We allow Palestinian refugees to return. Palestinians want to live alongside and with their Jewish brethren. It is Israel that is saying that, and now is proposing a nation-state bill that says Israel is for Jews only. So it's not Palestinians that are saying that we can't live with Jews. It's Israel that's saying that we can't live with anybody but Jews. And so which vision is creating more room for everyone? The Palestinian vision is actually something that can drive us to a better future and because we're only fixated on certain sensationalist things like the moments of kinetic violence, we're failing these signals about what it would take for us to coexist, which is a universal condition all of us are moving towards. If we moved our Islamophobic lens to think through who Palestinians are and what they live through, I think that we would acknowledge that the Palestinians are leading us to a universalist future where there's room for everyone, not the other way around.
What do you make of Australia's recent approach to this, voting against the Gaza inquiry by the Human Rights Council, abstaining from the vote against the US against recognition of Israel, Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and also Australia stopping direct aid to the Palestinian Authority? Australia had issues with the Human Rights Council. It says it's heavily biased against Israel. The number of resolutions is pretty extraordinary by the Human Rights Council, and was concerned that the money going to the Palestinian Authority wasn't going towards the right measures.
So I think that we have to think about what the government is, what the Australian government is doing, is what the Australian people actually want. I think that normally governments don't represent, in these situations, don't represent the will of the public. The fact that Australia is moving in lockstep with the United States in order to make this issue about bias towards Israel, in a moment of human rights violations, the issue is not the investigation of those violations, it's the violations themselves. As apartheid South Africa was subjugating an entire black population based on the fact that they were not white, the issue was not who was investigating South Africa. The issue was what the South African apartheid regime was doing. And so we need to be careful about what are we taking issue with. In the Human Rights Council, the reason that there may seem like there's excessive attention to Israel, it's not seen
like it's an extraordinary the percentage of votes on the Israel issue.
Only if you fail to recognize that Palestine was one of many permanent issues within the Human Rights Council. There was a permanent committee on abolishing apartheid in Namibia and South Africa. Guess what? Apartheid ended there. The only place it hasn't ended is in Palestine. So the fact that there is disproportionate attention is reflective of a third world agenda item that has not been resolved since the late 1960s. So it might seem anachronistic today when we think, oh, but we're in a post-colonial moment. This is an ongoing colonial situation that we have not resolved, and we are trying to unfold within a neoliberal agenda that equates between what Israel is, which is a nuclear power that is only able to maintain its domination because of U.S. unfettered diplomatic, financial, and military aid, and a stateless people that is simply struggling to exist and survive.
Yeah. Well, hopefully there can be some moves towards peace there, because here on the other side of the world we just see so much heartache there and so much conflict, and hopefully there'll be some progress over the coming years. Noura, Erakat, thanks so much for coming in and having a chat to us.
Thank you for having me.